Welcome, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming into my channel. This is Trev from Trevessence. And today we are going to be doing our morning's reading. Someone sent me this book. I don't know the author. Tried looking her up. Her name is Lynn Austin, but this book is called On the Foundation. And as I read the author's note, it says that this book is an exploration of faith in the midst of oppression. This book offers hope. Well, with that context, we are going to be reading this book. It says it's a novel and it's called On This Foundation. Never read the book before. I don't remember ever having read anything from this author. But like we do every morning, we read something. We read. Reading is healthy. Reading elevates the mind, expands the thought, develop your language. Reading is essential to your health. So therefore, we are going to be reading this book called On This Foundation by Lynn Austin. If you are new here, I want to say a very special welcome to you. Thank you so much for coming. And if you're a returning traveler, I want to say thank you for your continued support. Now, as I read the foreword of this book, and I noticed that the book was written based off of events from the early centuries, and the book also seems to be some writing related to the book of Nehemiah. And because, we do the readings of the Bible and we all want to understand the Bible and the teachings that are in the Bible and how they are applicable to our lives today, I think this book probably came at the right time. So we are going to read it together and figure out exactly what this book is about. Because I don't usually omit a book from my options of reading material until I've actually read the book. And then I say, well, that book wasn't so intriguing. The content of the book didn't seem relevant to me, or I just said, like, I didn't like the way that author used their words. But I don't say that until I've read the book. So today we're going to read this book, On This Foundation. Let us begin. Nehemiah descended the winding staircase to the palace kitchens, then paused in the arched doorway, savoring the warmth from the blazing hearth fires and enormous ovens. The aroma of roasting meat and baking bread greeted him. He enjoyed this part of his job, especially on early winter days like this one, when it was difficult to heat the cavernous palace rooms upstairs. He watched the sweating, red-faced cooks and scullery lads bustling around, chopping vegetables, skinning a goat, and plucking waterfowls. These men would probably prefer to work in a cooler room. No one glanced up at Nehemiah as he entered the huge work area, which was large enough to prepare food for the king and thousands of his guests. As the king's trusted cupbearer, Nehemiah inspected the palace kitchens and storerooms daily, making sure that nothing and no one who might pose a threat to the king, Artaxerxes, ever passed through the delivery doors and into the kitchen and up the stone stairs to his dining room. The narrow windows opened wide, and Nehemiah heard the rumble of wooden wheels outside and the heavy tread of oxen as a delivery wagon approached. The shipment of wine he expected had arrived. He crossed the smoky work area to unlock the wide delivery doors, opening them to a blast of chilly air that rushed inside along with a swirl of dried leaves. A cart piled high with clay storage jars and cushioned with straw pulled to halt outside. Nehemiah unearthed his sword as he prepared to probe the straw for stowaways. "Good morning, Shawl," he said to the driver who had led the yoked team of oxen. The driver finished fastening the reins to a post and turned. It wasn't Shawl. It was a stranger. Nehemiah tensed. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" "I'm Shelah ben Hobeah. I'm coming to deliver for Shawl today." "Not without consulting me, you're not." "Why wasn't I told? Who let you through the gates? Who is responsible for this?" "I said it would be all right," a voice from behind Nehemiah said. He spun around to face Joed, the palace clerk who kept track of deliveries and payments. "Sheila is a friend, and—" Nehemiah still had his sword in his right hand, but he gripped the front of the clerk's tunic with his left one. He pulled Joed close until their faces were inches apart. "No one enters the citadel without my authorization. Do you understand? No one. I want both of you out, and don't ever come back." He released Joed and pushed him outside through the open door. But, but, my lord," Joel sputtered, I've known Sheila since childhood. I can vouch for him, and I don't doubt that you can. And King Zegores also knew the man who entered his bedchamber and murdered him, one of our own courtiers. The familiar rage boiled inside Nehemiah, and in an instant he was back in his bedroom the night his father opened the door to an acquaintance and forfeited his life. He gave the clerk another shove, propelling him backwards and casting him to stumble against one of the oxen. "King Xerxes' herd can't afford to trust anyone," Nehemiah said. "Every leak and every lintel and wineskin will be carefully inspected by my staff and me before it enters this palace, along with every man who delivers it, cooks it, or serves it. It's the only way to keep our sovereign king, Artaxerxes, safe and secure." "Please, my lord, I won't let it happen again." "You are right, Joed, you won't." "Guards!" he shouted for the king's guards, watching from their post inside the kitchen. "Escort these men all the way over the bridge and out of the citadel," he ordered. "And the shipment of wine, my lord?" one of the guards asked. "Send it back. Tell them the next time there's a new delivery man, I need to be informed." Nehemiah turned and went inside again, slamming and locking the door behind him. All activity in the kitchen had halted, as if the sky and its icy winds had frozen the men in their places. He saw two young cook assistants exchange looks, as if they thought him as being an unreasonable tyrant. They hadn't worked in the kitchen very long, and even though Nehemiah and his staff of cupbearers and security personnel had thoroughly investigated these newcomers and their backgrounds, they would always be suspect until they had proven themselves. He walked towards the table where they had been plucking a brace of fowls, the feathers sticking to their hands and dusting the table like snowflakes. "You think my actions are extreme? That I'm being overly cautious?" "No, my lord." Both young men shook their heads, but the look they had exchanged said otherwise. "Listen, all of you," he said, addressing the entire kitchen staff. "In just a few months, the king's official representatives will arrive from every chapistry and province in the empire, and the annual round of banquets will begin. The month-long event could easily turn into a security nightmare if we let down our guards. The Persian court has a history of intrigue and power struggles and assassinations. One tiny slip, such as accepting a shipment from an unknown deliveryman, and King Artaxerxes' life could be in danger. Indeed, as his cupbearer, Nehemiah would also forfeit his life. He gazed at the cooks and assistants and scullery lads until he was satisfied by their submissive cowering that they understood the seriousness of today's breach. Back to work then. The king expects to be fed on time. Nehemiah stayed at his post in the kitchen for the remainder of the morning, watching over the kitchen staff as they finished preparing the midday meal. When King Artaxerxes called for his food, Nehemiah ascended the winding stone staircase to the dining room, along with the waiters who carried and served the lavish meal. He bore the king's flask of wine and golden drinking python right on himself. His presence assured Artaxerxes that every morsel of food, every drop of wine had been carefully inspected. If the king so desired, Nehemiah stood nearby to taste each dish, and sip from every flask before the king did. Oh, those of you who um who would have read about ancient kings, you know that's what they used to do. So they had to have a servant, one that was trusted, and that servant would would taste their food, taste their wine before they drank it. And I think the practice is still done even in modern days because like leaders of those tyrants who lead countries, some countries in Africa, and even like Russia and China, those places, the leaders are always on guard because they're always worried that somebody might poison them. So they usually travel with somebody to taste their food. Have you ever watched something about like Putin? Putin, they always say he does not trust anybody. When you see him around a table with other officials, he's sitting at the head of the table, but he's sitting so far away from everybody. He does not share with them. His food has to be specially prepared because he does not trust that nobody will try to maybe poison him. So, yeah, I can imagine a life like that where you're living in fear, thinking that somebody might. But that was the life of aristocrats and kings and queens and important personnel back in the day. And people today, even today, still practice it because you know how nefarious others can be. And if they can't just come and take you out with a bullet, they will try to do it some other way. So that's what the king was doing here. He had one person, Nehemiah, who stood by at all times to taste his food and sip of his wine before he drank it. So I wouldn't want that job because if the food is poisoned, I sure was going to die. I, you were going to die, and that would save the king. So it would mean that you gave up your life for the king. Well, if you love him that much, that would be fine. But anyway, let's continue with this book. After the meal, Nehemiah was on his way down to the kitchen again when one of the other cupbearers met him on the stairs. There's a man at the gatehouse asking to see you. Do you know who he is? Not that hap- Not that hapless clerk I fired this morning, begging back for his job, is it? No, my lord, I've never seen this man before, but judging by his clothing and appearance, he's a Jew. Nehemiah wondered if his fellow cupbearer or any of the other security personnel he worked with knew that he was also a Jew. Probably not. Like them, Nehemiah wore the uniform of the palace staff. I'd better go and see who it is. Take over my duties until I get back. He strode through the palace corridors and across the open plateau to the gatehouse, annoyed at the disruption. Whoever the visitor was, he would have to pass a security check before being allowed into the palace and citadel. Nehemiah swung open the door, preparing for an argument, and there stood his brother. Was he seeing things? He gave a cry of joy before swiftly crossing the room and sweeping him off the floor into a massive bear hug. Hanani, what in the world are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Jerusalem. Hanani gave a gasp of laughter. Put me down, you crazy man. I can't breathe. Nehemiah set him down again, laughing as he held his brother at arm's length. Let me look at you. I can't believe you are here. I don't think we have seen each other in a long time. Not, nor did I, Anani said, wiping his eyes. How long has it been, my brother? 12 years, nearly 13. Nehemiah embraced him again, then said, I should have gone to Jerusalem with you and Ephraim. As soon as you left, I regretted my decision and wished I had chosen differently. He remembered praying all night as he had agonized over whether or not to join Rebbe Ezra's caravan and move to Judah with his brothers. At the time, he felt that he owed Mordecai a great debt. You look wonderful, Anani, he said. The promised land must agree with you. I can't tell you how happy I am to see you. How is Ephraim? He's well, married with a baby on the way. And you? Are you married? A grin lit up Anani's face. Yes, my beautiful wife has given me a little son and a daughter. What about you, my brother? Nehemiah waved away the question, too busy to look for a wife. But tell me, why are you here? You haven't decided to return, have you? No, not at all, Anani said. I'm an aide with the official delegation from Judah. I work as a scribe, like Abba did. Nehemiah's smile faded at the mention of their father. For the second time that day, he felt a stab of grief as he relived the night when his father opened the door to his assassin. Do you remember Abba Anani? You were only 4. Not very well, I don't. I remember that he was very tall, with thick black hair like you. And I remember his laughter booming like thunder, and how he used to throw me up in the air and catch me. They both fell silent for a moment. So why are you here? Nehemiah asked again. Your delegation is a few months early for the tribute ceremonies. Guys, I want to stop right here. You know why? I don't know any of you who have read the book of Nehemiah in the Bible, but I want to stop right here because I want to go back and read the book of Nehemiah before I go any further with this book. Let me see how far we are from the end of chapter 1. All right, we're going to finish chapter 1, and then we are going to read the book of Nehemiah because I want to refresh my memory on the book of Nehemiah because somehow as I am reading these first few pages, my mind is taking me back to that book in the Bible. So we are going to read and compare notes and see if that's what this book is really about. Fair enough? Yes, that's what I think we should do. But let us continue. Let us continue. Let's finish reading chapter 1 at least. We came to present our report to King Artaxerxes ahead of time and request a reduction in tribute. The drought in Judah has lasted for 2 growing seasons. Our people are suffering, and we are required to pay taxes to the provincial treasury too. Is Governor Ezra with you? No, he retired as Judah's governor a few years ago. The nobles and district leaders convinced him that he had accomplished his work as our leader and teacher. He's writing and studying now, using his vast knowledge to compile a history of his people. I understand it's something he has always wanted to do. They had remained standing all this time, and now Nehemiah felt restless to be on the move again, unable to contain the nervous energy that fueled him and kept him working from before dawn until long after sunset. Would you like to walk with me, Hanani? I'll show you the palace courtyards and the Apadna. where the king holds banquets for several thousand people. They are quite impressive. Maybe tomorrow. I was hoping you would come with me to meet the others. There's so much to tell you. Now, I would love to hear about life in the promised land, but Nehemiah glanced around for a moment, wondering if he could spare a few hours this afternoon. He scrolled through the mental list of his responsibilities before deciding. Very well, I'll come with you, but I can't stay long. Anani led the way out through the King's Gate and across the bridge to the city. I had forgotten how imposing the citadel of Susa is, Anani said, glancing over his shoulder at the towering palace. Some of the others, who have never been there before, were awestruck by the sheer size of everything. They said they feel like ants being beside all these soaring buildings. AG Born Jamaica, how are you doing, my brother? So good to see you as always. Happy Wednesday. Wednesday hump day it is. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I'm reading this book called On This Foundation. Never read it before, never read from this author, but I'm starting to like it. Let's continue. That's exactly the king's intention, Nehemiah said. Such grandeur is a fitting backdrop for the throne of the Persian Empire. No, they're talking about the Persian Empire. It does sound like it was before the ages. But anyway, yes. But does the king understand the true cost? His taxes are crippling us. Many of the people in his empire are destitute, including our fellow Jews in Judah. Truly, I had no idea. Nehemiah wondered if living here in Susa all his life had blinded him to the empire's problems. If he had returned to Jerusalem with his brothers, would he also view such Persian opulence with different eyes? So, what's your job now? In such in such a splendid palace? Anani asked, breaking into his thoughts as they walked. I'm King Artaxerxes' cupbearer. Really? Anani halted in the middle of the crowded street, causing several pedestrians to bump into them. Yes, really. It's my duty to ensure the safety of his food and wine. But the job involves much more than that. The king's cupbearers are responsible for many other aspects of security in the citadel besides the food. As you can imagine, Artaxerxes is extremely concerned about safety after what happened to his father. He paused, then added, Of all people, you and I can understand that, right, Anani? Of course, and I'm very proud of my big brother. Now tell me, Anani said as he continued walking through the busy streets. How did you rise in prominence to such an important job? When I left, you were working as a governor's aide. King Asteraxerxes assigned court security to Mordecai when he learned that years ago he had uncovered a plot against the king's father and was honored for it. He asked Mordecai to find and employ trustworthy court attendants to handle security in the citadel. I didn't want the job at first. I couldn't see how I could serve the Almighty One, as a cupbearer. But Mordecai convinced me that God needed men of prayer and faith in all occupations, that a cupbearer held a position of even greater trust than a palace guard, and he was right. They reached the Jewish section of the lower city of Susa, breathless from the vigorous walk, and went inside the house of assembly. A fire blazed in the brazier, and Nehemiah removed his outer robe in the overheated room. I'd like you to meet my brother Nehemiah, Anani told his delegation from Jerusalem. He introduced each man to Nehemiah before adding, He now serves in an even more important position in the palace than he did when I left. He is a cupbearer to the king. Everyone seemed pleased at the news, but Nehemiah quickly set them straight. Unfortunately for your delegation, my work as the king's cupbearer isn't going to be of much help to you. If I were an aide, I might have been able to make sure your petition reached the throne room. But while I have very close access to King Artaxerxes and enjoys utmost trust, I am not allowed to speak in his presence unless he bids me. However, I will be happy to contribute my insights or any insights of yours into the Persian court that might be helpful to you. That would be much appreciated. Maybe it would help if I had a clearer picture of the situation in Judah, Nehemiah directed. For starters, tell me about Jerusalem. The room fell silent, as if he had asked about a tragic death. Indeed, the leader of the delegation gave a heavy sigh before speaking, his face somber. Our fellow Jews who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. His words and the grave tone with which he spoke shocked Nehemiah. He let them sink in for a moment before leaning forward in his seat. Go on, he said. When I look at this magnificent city of Susa, with its towering walls and pillars, the stunning citadel perched on the hill, they reflect the splendor of the king who reigns here. Our reigning king is the Almighty One, yet his city is a pitiful reflection of his power and glory. The walls of Jerusalem are broken down, and its gates have been burnt with fire. Wait, Nehemiah said, leaning closer still. Are you saying there are no walls all around the city? That the people are defenseless against their enemies? That's right. When the Babylonians burnt the city, not only did the gates burn, but the heat of the flames caused the limestone building blocks to crumble. The Babylonian army demolished all our fortifications. And even though the eastern approach to the city has always been protected by a steep slope, another man added, all the supporting terraces have disintegrated, first from the fire, then from the rain and the weather. Some men in our community attempted to rebuild the walls a number of years ago, the leader continued, but the enemy nations around us were able to get an edict from the Persian king forcing us to stop. They even made us destroy what we had already built. That's outrageous. Nehemiah's anger flared like oil on hot coals. What about the Holy One's temple? Surely that's protected and secure. No, it isn't. No, the temple is also unprotected. And without walls, the Levite guards have their hands full safeguarding the temple treasury. We can't trust the governor in Samaria or his province guards to protect us, even if he agreed to send them. We are hated by all who surround us, the Samaritans and the Edomites and the Amorites and the Arabs. They would like nothing better than to see us all in our graves. I think I was right, guys. I think I was right. I believe I was right when I said that the story is from the Persian era. Here they're talking about the Samaritans and the Edomites and the Ammonites and the Arabs. And for those of you who were reading the Bible with us, I remember in the book of Numbers, where Moses reached the promise, well, he didn't reach the promised land, he was still on Mount Pisgah, but it spoke about these people being living around the River Jordan, the Edomites and the Ammonites, and Moses had taken their land and distributed it among the children of Israel. So I believe this book is from the Persian era. Well, the story, not the book, but the story is from the Persian era. Hey, Courtian, how are you doing, my love? So good to see you. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I'm reading this book called On This Foundation by Lynn Austin. Let us continue. We are going to read chapter 1 only, and then we are going to switch. And then we are going to switch and we are going to go read the book of Nehemiah in the Bible, because I want to see the references and the similarities between what this book is talking about and what the book of Nehemiah says, because I believe this story is the same story that the book of Nehemiah talks about in the Bible. ABS, what's up? How are you doing? So good to see you. Good morning. She says, good morning. Good morning, Traversins, and everyone else in the chat. Getting ready for the day, and we'll be in the background. Thank you so much, my love. I sincerely appreciate it. Let us continue. Oh, somebody's texting me. Let us continue. No, the temple is also unprotected, and without walls, the Levite guards have their hands full safeguarding the temple treasury. We can't trust the governor of Samaria or his provincial guards to protect us, even if he agreed to send them. We are hated by all our neighbors around us, the Samaritans and the Edomites, the Ammonites and the Arabs. They would like nothing better than to see us all in our graves. There's no way to fortify the city? Nehemiah asked. If we attempted to do it without King Arcester's permission, it would be interpreted as an act of rebellion. And where would we get the funds? As it is, we are here because we can't afford to pay the taxes he has imposed. Rebuilding the walls would be an impossible undertaking. Nehemiah shook his head, unable to grasp what he was hearing. So you are telling me that the city and the Temple Mount are both completely vulnerable? Our enemies could come in and kill our people and destroy Jerusalem and the Almighty One's temple all over again? Completely vulnerable, the leader confirmed. And because of it, the number of robberies and vicious attacks has been escalating after 2 years of drought. Our enemies strike at night, looking for food and grain because of the famine. No one feels safe. A young friend of mine named Yitzhak ben Rephia was killed several months ago, Anani added, when his home in Jerusalem was, ro- was robbed. Yitzhak was about to be married and had just built a new home for his bride. The thieves killed him and emptied his storehouse. In fact, he lived very close to Ephraim and his family. It could have been him. Nehemiah felt a powerful anger building inside him as the picture of the city's helplessness grew clearer. Security was his livelihood. It was his passion. He was beginning to understand what his leader had meant when he had said their people were in great trouble and a disgrace. What could he do? I need to return to my responsibilities in the citadel. We'll talk again, he promised as he left them. The leader's words continued to echo in Nehemiah's mind throughout the afternoon and the rest of the evening, long after he had returned to his spare living quarters in the citadel. Great trouble and disgrace. The report appalled him, not only for the sake of the people who were being robbed and killed by their enemies, but for the Almighty One's sake. Nehemiah unbuckled his sword and removed his uniform. His bed had been prepared for him, but he wasn't ready to sleep. He opened the shuttered window and looked out at the vast sprinkle of stars above the roof of the palace. Just as the magnificent city of Susa brought glory and honor to the Persian king, so too should the city and temple of the one true God bring glory and honor to him. The lack of city walls and gates meant shame and disgrace. The the heathens could easily destroy Jerusalem again as they had done 140 years ago. Even worse, this vulnerability sent a message to their enemies that the Holy One was unable or unwilling to protect his people. Nehemiah closed the window and paced the floor. Then, knowing that his work would begin before dawn and that he needed to sleep, he snuffled out of the lamp and sank into his bed. Somehow, seeing Anani again and being reminded twice today of their father's tragic death made him feel like a child, helpless and vulnerable. He had saved himself and his brothers on that day, long, long ago, by hiding in a hollow corner between the wall and the huge wooden chest his father had propped up at an angle in the room. Nehemiah and his two brothers had often hidden in that space when playing games. And although all of Nehemiah's instincts urged him to find a way to protect his brothers once again, to protect all of his people in Jerusalem, he had no way. of doing it. Our fellow Jews who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. Alone in his room, Nehemiah didn't try to stop his tears. That is chapter 1, my friends, of the book on this foundation, which seems to have been written. It seems to be a story about Nehemiah and the Persian king. That a story that has been in the book of Nehemiah in the Bible, as I remember correctly. I don't like to jinx a book. I don't like to pre-read the book before I read it to you all, because then I'm going to go look up something. And for example, the Bible. We have read the Bible, even though I have read the Bible in its totality, but on the channel we have only gotten to Deuteronomy. We are on to Deuteronomy. We're going to continue reading it again someday soon. And I don't know if this book came at the right time, because the information in this book seems to be in coordination with the Bible, with the book of Nehemiah in the Bible. And so I want to pause here from having read chapter 1 and go back to the book of Nehemiah, read that book of Nehemiah, and then compare it as we read this book. How does that sound, guys? Does that sound like a plan? Well, that's going to be the plan. That's what I intend to do. Because I want, when I read this book and the information that's in the book, because, I'm not just reading the book just because somebody asked me to read it, and I thought it was quite gracious of them to ask me to read this book. But I want to get some more context. And I think the book of Nehemiah might be able to provide such context for this book. So that's where we're going to end for today. Tomorrow, we are going to start reading the book of Nehemiah in the Bible. And once we get that out of the way, continuing to read this book on this foundation, we will get some biblical reference for what is going on and help us more to understand this book. All right? Okay, my friends. So that is going to be it from me for today. It's a shortened version of the read for now, but we will be back later today sometime. We will be back later today on a different live, different context, different topic. But that's going to be it from me for today. I want to say thanks to everybody who has come into the live this morning. AG Born Jamaican, Courtian, VS, I'm sure Sister Winsome is somewhere in the background, and Cad is somewhere in the background as well as others who are silent listeners. But I want to say thank you all so much for coming in. This is going to be it for today. Until next time, my friends, this is Trev from Traversons, where your journey matters. I'll see you all later, my friends. Why is he texting me that? Oh my God.